Okay, welcome. Tonight we're going to look at Unit 4, Cognition, Language, and Thought. This is Part 3, and we'll be checking out cognition at work. We've discussed cognition along the way here. Cognition is the awareness brought about by the process of thinking, the act and process of knowing. So the wheels of thinking are in motion here, and that's what we're going to be looking at, but also with special focus on language, how that impacts our thought, and what type of language would impact thought. So I want you to be considering and thinking about this. Do animals use language? Do humans that cannot speak use language? So a couple things to consider and think about here before we get this started. There are cognitive barriers and cognitive load. This means that there are steps you have to take to get what you want. There are perceived lengths of each stop to get where you want to be. And there are the perceived difficulty of each step. And then the cognitive load part is, of course, the number of choices you have to make, the amount of thought required to create that choice and to get to your desired area that you want to be at, and then the confusion and choice that sometimes enters into play. There's a famous kind of story where a few blind persons walk up to an elephant, and they're each trying to touch the elephant to see what this thing is, and someone grabs the tusk, and someone grabs the the guy who grabs the tusk says, "This is a spear. What is this thing in front of us?" Someone else says, "Oh, it's a snake," because they've grabbed the trunk. The fan is the ears. It's a tree because they're grabbing hold of the legs. It's a rope because of the tail. It's a wall because of the side of it. Of course, these folks who are doing that are kind of blindfolded and they look like scientists, but there are barriers to our cognition. If for some reason there's a sensation or you're not able to perceive what things are, it can be a little bit of a problem. So what's cognition at work? It's pretty simple. It's what you know and you feel and you want and you value. And then there's that loop of the drives that push your behavior and your actions, what you actually accomplish and do. That produces performance and adds value to that. If you especially enjoyed the process you went through, you're more likely to do it again in the future, and that's where the learning loops come in. So there's a lot of ways to look at communication, thought, and cognition. One way here that we're going to focus on it is through the process of visualization. Many of you are athletes or performers. Maybe you're in the choir, the band. Maybe you do some work with theater. Whether it's sports or theater or whatever, do you perform? And when you're performing, do you do that with language or without language? Certainly there are situations where you're using language. But we can think in words alone. Excuse me. But more often, we think in mental pictures, images, or spatial relations. So Reggie Jackson is the person who is pictured here the most. And in the center there, this shot here of the 3 swings he's made. I think that's one actual swing. But he hit 3 home runs in that World Series game. Only a few other people have done this, one being Babe Ruth before him and Albert Pujols after him. All 3 of these gentlemen, who are pretty decent baseball players and great performers in October, all of 3 of them talked about visualizing or seeing what they were going to do before they went up to home plate to hit the ball. And do you do that sort of thing when you're having to accomplish a task or perform in a way that is on stage or potentially in front of an audience, do you kind of visualize yourself doing that? That's a cognitive process, and it's one that Albert Pujols there at the bottom used as well, and I think this is in 2011, so just a few years ago. He hit 3 home runs against Texas in a World Series game to help propel the Cardinals to win the World Series. Let's take a look at linguistic universals, because a lot of this is language we're talking about. So, what is arbitrariness? These are words that are not inherently imbued with meaning. They are selected and stand for objects in the world in an arbitrary manner. So they have some arbitrariness, or they're in some ways not specified. That means that, like dog, is dog in English, but it's chien in French. So the arbitrariness means here that words are not themselves the meaning of something, but we imbue them with meaning. We, kind of pipe that meaning into it. There's no meaning to a word like dog. It's just dog, D-O-G, but because we've learned it as being what it is, man's best friend, or my best friend who's in the next room over there. Displacement is language allowing us to talk about events that have already happened, events that will happen, and events that may not happen at all. And no other form of communication allows for this. We've discussed that a little bit as we have gone through the introduction to this, how humans are able to do this, and that's pretty rare in the world. No other mammals really are able to accomplish this. The vocal auditory channel. So all languages in all cultures rely on this as their primary form of communication and using language. It's the primary form. It doesn't mean it's the only form. Sign language, of course, is one way you can have a language without having the vocal auditory channel activated, but that's the way that we're most comfortable. If we can use that form, that's what people are going to use. So body language, is that a vocal auditory channel? It is not. But body language can often really help you to understand someone's meaning, someone's mood heading into a conversation. Someone may not even say anything to you, but you may know immediately that they're either happy or dissatisfied or whatever. And you can read through these a little bit here, but a couple of these, and I remember when I was a kid, I used to sit with my arms crossed like this, and I didn't know it meant anything. I would just do this. I was probably doing that because I was a messed up kid. But my dad used to get on me all the time about it. Why are you crossing your arms? Why are you crossing your arms? That signals to other people that you don't trust them, or that you're not feeling safe or whatever. And people will think that you are... And it says most commonly seen in use by 12 to 15-year-old girls. I'm going to try to pop this out full screen so it's a little bit easier to see. And you won't have to look at me for a couple minutes anyway, so that's good. But this is most commonly seen in adolescence, and it is a territorial display of dominance, or to proceed with caution. I think it also can be when someone's unsure of themselves. It depends on sort of how you're doing it. If you're crossed your arms and you're pulled into yourself and you're protecting yourself. Neck touching is one example of a habit that can betray a person's true feelings on a matter. They could be nervous because they're concealing the truth or a truth in a bar setting, like for an adult. It could be a sign that you are staring at them too long and it makes them nervous. Dilated pupils, when someone finds another person or thing attractive, the pupils will dilate. And in turn, dilation often is found attractive by others. Of course, you don't really know how to do this. You don't create that on your own. And drugs and alcohol can also induce that side effect. Leaning forward can be seen as an act of aggression, and can signal anger as well. Very interesting. In debates, it's a sign of confidence, but be sure both debaters are not leaning forward at the same time. That looks very kind of an attacking. And it says a concussion may follow. And crossing your legs or your feet is a sign of being comfortable or relaxed in a circumstance or with a person. If their feet are crossed, they're wiggling around their chair is a sign of needing a bathroom break. But better cut the meeting short. So some of these are kind of silly and fun. Your body language can say a lot, and people have a tendency to really use body language much more than we're aware of. And here's a video clip called The Secrets of Body Language. I'm going to play the very beginning of this clip just so you have a chance to hear it. It's interesting anyway, and then I'll cut it. I'm just going to play like just a couple seconds. But it shows you what you could look for. You could definitely do this for extra credit assignment if you'd like.
A walk to convey power. A greeting that gets the upper hand. A gesture that can hide a lie. Body language can betray us. When a president's under pressure, or celebrities in the media glare, look beyond the words. Their body language says it all.
It's a certain poise.
Self-touch gesture?
Hotspots, micro-expressions.
In this special, experts...
So I'll pause it here. This gives you an idea of what it's about. It's pretty interesting stuff. I've had a couple kids do that in the past. They did the body language for extra credit and found that it was really pretty interesting. It's awful political, but there are some things in there about like celebrities and those kinds of things. So what do you think about animals? Kohler, and I've had some students named Kohler. I have 2 of them this year. They have been looking at chimps and how could they solve some problems. Well, it's been observed that the manner in which chimpanzees solve problems, such as that they are retrieving bananas positioned out of reach, is not through just trial and error, but instead they're observed to proceed in a manner that has unwavering purposefulness, and they're going after this with a kind of a thought process, a cognition. Animals of quite a range of species are capable of solving problems that are argued to involve abstract reasoning. And modern research is tending to show that the performance of Wolfgang Kohler's chimpanzees, who could achieve spontaneous solutions to problems without training, were by no means unique, and that lots of other animals are able to do this when given a little bit of training. You can see my animals down there at the bottom. I mean, a dog's driving is a little uncertain there. I'm not sure he could get his license, but it looks like he's got pretty good command of the road. And we've got that cat in the middle who I'm pretty sure is yawning, but I'm going to end up yawning. Contagious. See how that works? It's contagious. We'll learn that later as we go. And I love the one of the cat at the bottom who escapes the dog by jumping on the surfboard. That's pretty sweet. But chimpanzees, obviously a sort of a distant cousin to us evolutionarily, have a way of solving problems as well. And they've also shown us some amazing things with sign language. Of course, the woman that you see there, the top right picture I like especially because this is before the gray hair set in for her. But she spent her life and really devoted her life to learning with these special animals, and she's brought so much love and attention to them. This is, of course, Jane Goodall, who is in the pictures here, the 4 pictures here, visiting the Houston Zoo's exhibit, the chimpanzee exhibit. This is in 2010. It's a pretty cool place. If you've ever been to the zoo in Houston, I hope you've had the chance to go back there and see it. It's in sort of the Africa area. The chimpanzees have a wide open area to play in and to roam in, and it's really fascinating to see the interactions that they have with people in this more of a naturalized setting. My son sat in front of these guys a bunch of times. I should put a couple pictures in here for the future, but and it's, you know, I've always missed the pictures or the video with it because he'd be sitting there, and sometimes the chimpanzee and my son, when he was younger, they would like mirror each other. My kid would move his hand here, and so would the chimpanzee. It was really pretty cool to see and to look at and to recognize that there's a thought process going on, and at least an imitation happening. That's pretty fun. Coco is one of the more famous sign language animals. And Coco was the gorilla that learned how to sign. And there's just fascinating video on this on the internet if you ever get a chance to look at it. I mean, it's not necessary for what we're studying, but if you like animals and you're interested in animal language and cognition and thought, we've learned a lot by teaching animals this. But you can even look at honeybees. They seem to communicate just in the patterns that they fly in to give signals or ideas to the other bees. It's kind of interesting what science can show us when we study these guys. This video is fantastic, and the year that I'm creating this, we are not going to have very much time to show this. If I ever have a sub or need a sub, I may leave it for you guys. But this is fantastic. It's a 60 minutes show where they get into the secret language of elephants. And I wanted to mention really quickly about this, that one of the most fascinating things about this story is that the elephants are communicating in the jungle in a way that humans have never been able to really figure out. And the guys, like this man that they're showing here, and the woman who spent like the last 20 or 30 years of her life with these elephants, what they have done is determined that they're speaking in a way that humans can't even hear, in vibrations that are beyond or below our levels of being able to perceive them. And they're fascinating creatures, and I think it's a good reason to watch it. It's just an appreciation for caring for the habitat of these animals, making sure that they can continue to survive. What's fascinating too is to know that there is a secret language of elephants that exists, and this communication layer or level is one that scientists are trying to decode, and they're creating what's called an elephant dictionary to be able to determine exactly what these sounds mean. So they're recording lots of sound and at a volume and a pitch that humans can't hear, and they're sending all that through the internet back to colleges and universities in America where people are working on this project pretty heavily. I think they should come up with some pretty good and interesting findings from this. So the next thing we're going to look at, and this is cognition at work, is the problem-solving nature of it. I like the bottom there. Become aware that there's a problem. Wait 19 seconds. If problem persists, begin making high-pitched sounds. Continue making high-pitched sounds until problem is fixed. That's kind of the dog's way of looking at things. My dog does this on the way to the dog park every day. He's just like, I know we're getting closer. I am talking about you, buddy. He's sleeping. So there's 4 approaches here. There's algorithms, which is a step-by-step approach. The second is heuristics, a procedure that has worked in the past and is likely to be seen to work in the future. Means-end analysis, which keeps in mind the final goal when reaching and setting sub-goals. And working backwards, which is starting with the goal state and working backwards until you reach the present state. So you start at like the end and you work backwards till you reach present state is a better way to look at that. We'll give you some examples here, but things that will cause the simple dog to suddenly understand and be at peace with changes in her life. Reassurance and support? No. The fact that there was nothing to be afraid of or scared of in the first place? No. Time has passed and nothing happened? No. Simple logic? Of course not. There is a toy and it makes noises when it's squeezed. Reassurance. Let's look at Facebook talking about reassurance. Isn't it reassuring to know that they change their settings on the privacy just about every 6 months and don't really tell you much about it? Facebook also uses algorithms to determine what it is that you see on your page or in your feed. And they're pretty complicated, but they have 3 major factors: affinity, weight, and time decay. So let's check these out. This is called EdgeRank, and it determines what content shows up in your newsfeed, and values placed on those 3 things: affinity, weight, and time. Affinity is the measurement and measured by the engagements and interactions the user has with the other poster, the person who posts content. So how much interaction have you had with that person? Obviously, if you've not had much interaction with them, they may not choose to put it on your timeline, and so you won't see it on your news feed. The weight is the measured type of content that's being shared in each piece, or content varies in weight. The time period is measured in the recency of the piece of content, so it depends on how long ago that they posted it. Based on above, the Facebook is able to assign a value to every piece of content that ends up in your newsfeed. And what they do is, this algorithm is, for the content users don't see in their feed. It kicks it out of their feed. They don't even end up seeing that someone posted something. The less users interact with pages that they have liked, the less likely they are to see that page's content in their feed. So what does this mean? Well, an algorithm is creating a process for Facebook that they're trying to guess and estimate what you want to see the most of. If, for example, you get onto Facebook and you have 500 friends, which we've already mentioned is too many. It's hard to keep up with that many. And you're trying to read everything, you would spend a lot of time on Facebook, and if you saw things maybe you didn't like very much, you might get to a point where you were dissatisfied with Facebook and not go back to it. You can go in, especially on your phone and online, and click the thing that says, okay, show me only what has happened here recently. I'll just open it up and show you, just so you have an idea of what I'm talking about, because I know it's a little bit confusing. If you go to Facebook, which I haven't been to really today very much, I think I posted some pictures of, this will work. So, if we pull this down a little bit here, we've got the sort button right there. If you click on sort, you can go to top stories, which is Facebook approved. EdgeRank has gone in there and tweaked it so that what is showing up on this page right here is something that Facebook thinks that I want to see. There's the head and the heart, Ms. Guillory, Ms. Hausman. There's a picture of my son swimming, and people were splashing him because it was his birthday. This was posted by my wife, of course, so that's probably something I would want to see. And of course, Pearl Jam. I want to see Pearl Jam, so so does Facebook. They know I'm an Eddie Vedder fan, and I'm pretty excited about it. Well, isn't this interesting? If I click on sort and go to most recent, I will have a very different viewpoint here. So I'm seeing that in the first quarter, the Rams lead 3-0. What some people don't quite realize is that they're not seeing what they think they're seeing. And I love this too. Don't you love getting ads from Facebook that pop up here? I don't know who this guy is. I don't know why they're asking me to like his page, but it's a sponsored link. And here I am complaining about all this. And what is Facebook? Yeah, it's free. So I don't know why I'm complaining. But there are people who feel like this algorithm or changed their experience and the one that they signed up for, and so the one that they're used to, and they're not quite happy with it. Why is Facebook doing this? And why have they been doing it for a long time? Is because they know if you go to Facebook and you don't like what you see, you're more likely not to come back. So they're trying to paint a picture for you by using a complex algorithm to help you. So what is an algorithm? It's not an algorithm, but it's kind of funny. He's a guy that ran for president and kind of won because he won the popular vote, but he kind of lost because Florida was a mess in the 2000 election. And then the Supreme Court decided that the results in Florida would stand, and basically the Supreme Court named George Bush as the next president of the United States. Things were a little bit different after that because you had 8 years of George Bush. Things could have been different if Al Gore was president. Maybe he would have reinvented the internet. That's something that supposedly he didn't say it, but he kind of alluded to. Boy, he had a lot of credit for the internet, so maybe you should make him president. Whatever. It's hard to see it here, but it's a pretty funny comment. The person wrote, for define what an algorithm is. A rhythm named after Al Gore. So it's an Al Gore rhythm. That's pretty funny. I doubt that there's any kind of rhythm that Al Gore would be able to do because he's not very good at it. So what is it? It's a step-by-step approach. I mean, he's not a good dancer is what I'm trying to say that I know of. Simple trial and error is algorithm in some ways. You're going to try X. If it doesn't work, you're going to try Y. If it doesn't work, you're going to try Z. You just keep working on the solution until you find the answer. And algorithms guarantee a solution, but they may be time consuming. For example, a good idea here to think of is your combination on your locker at school. Obviously, you could sit there and go through and do every single number for every single combination. It would take you a really long time. But if you did that, you would come up with a solution eventually. And that's what the algorithm is saying. You will get an answer. So what do algorithms look like? Sometimes they're sort of like mental maps or a process here that you would go through. Do you have a problem in your life? No? Then don't worry about it. Do you have a problem in your life? Yes. Can you do something about it? No? Then don't worry about it. Can you do something about it? Yes? Then don't worry about it. See how the process flows with an algorithm? Should you forward that email? Is it funny? No. Then don't forward it. Is it funny? Yes. Then don't forward it. But why it's funny? No. You get the idea here. Don't forward things to people. Grandmothers do that. I can't decide what to listen to. I'll just put it on shuffle. No, not that song. Not that one. Nope. And then it repeats through the loop. And doesn't that happen if you put it on shuffle and you just keep hitting the next thing? And you aren't usually happy with anything that comes up. The engineering flow chart. Does it move? No. Should it move? No. No problem. Should it move? Yes. WD-40. Does it move? Yes. Should it? No. Duct tape. See how there's an answer for every possible question. Hammer, duct tape, or WD-40. If it can't be fixed with those, it's not worth fixing. If it can't be fixed with duct tape, then you aren't using enough duct tape. That's a pretty good one. And this isn't quite an algorithm, but it is interesting how you may have to turn the knobs of certain people to get what you need to do to help them or to make them happy with you. But with men, sometimes it's just one thing. This is a good one too. Problem-solving flowchart. Does the thing work? No. Did you mess with it? Yes. You fool. Does anyone else know? Yes. You poor fool. Can you blame someone else? Yes. No problem. So that gives you a little bit of an idea there how that one works. There's a ton of those on the internet. Those are some of the better ones that I ran across the other day. But 4 strategies to problem solving. And the next one, anybody? Heuristics. A heuristic is a procedure that's worked in the past and is seen as a likely solution to the problem here in the future. And it's like a rule of thumb. At the bottom there it says rule of thumb. If your extended thumb, okay, you put your extended thumb out, if it's too small to block your view of the hazmat incident, then you're not far enough away. That's pretty interesting, isn't it? Pretty fun. Heuristics are rules of thumb based on past experience. If the light in your room goes out, you could check the fuse box, you could change the light bulb, you could check the wires in the wall of the lamp, you could check the socket, on and on and on. But what should you probably do? Because experience suggests that the probability of the light bulb burning out is higher than any other choices. You'd go there first. What I would do is just call the electric company and let them know that the lamp's not working. Maybe not. Heuristics take less time than algorithms, but they may not result in a solution, especially right away, because you're making a guess or an estimate. What we do in problem solving is to kiss it, to keep it simple, stupid. And a good example of that is like with a computer. Sometimes if it's not running properly, you just close all the programs and restart the thing, log back in, and just see if that's fixed the problem for now. Maybe there was a program that was kind of stuck or running into memory loss problems or that kind of thing. Let's look at another one of these 4 strategies. I think this is the third one. It's means-end analysis, which means you're looking at the final goal and keeping that in mind when setting some sub-goals. For example, when I'm planning for my courses in AP, I look and see when's the AP test. Then I go back in time, and I know I want this much time for review and then I know we need to cover everything with this much time. Then I start building the course out. But I build the course out from the end goal in mind, because we know when that test is. We know that's the goal, to be ready by then. So let's build back and see if we're ready. So if you're planning to study for your finals, you might start with math, but set a time limit, because you have other exams to worry about too. So the means-end analysis can be done in lots of different ways. But what you need to spend the same amount of time on each problem, probably not, and what do you need to focus on? What should you be doing? The other one to look at here with the 4 strategies to problem solving is working backwards. And this is a pretty fascinating one. This is the reverse engineering. You're going to start with a goal state, the goal state, and then work backward until you reach the present state. That's working backward. But this is also when you reverse engineer a product. When you work on that project and see how it goes, but you take it apart and then put it back together. People who had the Xbox 360 and considered themselves pretty proficient with computers started taking the thing apart and then reprogramming it. And using the power of open source applications, they were able to download like computers that other people have run. And it's open source, meaning anybody can get the code and add to it or subtract to it or make it better. And it was free, so people started to hack these things. So Microsoft got very upset about it at first. Then they realized that there's a whole huge market of people who were doing some amazing work with it. They ended up opening that up and allowing people to get in there and do it as much as they want. And they built a tool set for people to work on this project and see what they can do with it. And there are some folks who have come up with some pretty awesome solutions based upon technology that was closed and cordoned off from the public at first. Is it possible to read a person's mind? This is another one of those great 60 Minutes episodes where Leslie Stahl will show you. And I think I've shared this one with you before, earlier in the semester, because what we're doing is they'd put somebody in an fMRI machine and measure the blood flow in the brain. So what we're looking at here is neuroscience, but it's also, at this point in time, can you see the cognition that's happening in someone's brain? Because of technology, we've been able to get a much better sense of how the processing is working in the brain and how it functions. Forms of mentalism and famous mentalists, these are people who have been able to look at people and do a cold reading or hot reading, or be able to do some fortune telling. It's a way of problem solving in a way. Let's look at the next one here. It's called the availability heuristic. And under certain conditions, like conditions of certainty, we often use the availability heuristic. It's where we estimate the probability of certain events in terms of how readily they come to mind. So you're presented with a list of options or a problem, and you immediately are going to go for the one that you can think of. And if you can think of it, it must be important. This is Tversky and Kahneman. And in 1973, this team of psychologists and researchers first coined the term of availability heuristic. Things that come to mind more easily are believed by the person to be far more common and more accurate reflections of the real world. Now, are they? Maybe not. But we believe it is because it's what's so apparent to us. A good example of availability heuristic may be global warming. For most people, they can't seem to think that this is possible because right in front of them, we may get a cold day this week. And, well, it's not global warming. The planet's not warming up. It's freezing today. But they're not looking at the wide scope of research that may have been done to show that overall the climate has changed. Another good one is people who think that they're in a lot of trouble on an airplane. And that's why we got the airplane jokes around the edge. But that's a pretty great movie if you've never seen Airplane. I think it's rated R, but it's pretty funny. It's an oldie but a goodie. But riding in an airplane is statistically much safer than riding in a car, yet are people afraid or fearful when they get into a car? Well, I'd probably be afraid or fearful if I was in a car with some of you, because you're pretty young drivers. but for the most part, people feel safer behind the wheel of an automobile, but you're much more likely to be in an accident in that situation. How about some other examples of availability heuristic? After seeing several TV programs about shark attacks, and maybe it's Shark Week, you may go into the beach or go on vacation and being very fearful of sharks, even though the probability of a shark attack is not high at all. After seeing several news reports about people losing their jobs, you start to believe that's going to happen to you, although there's not really any evidence around you to suggest that might happen. Sometimes this creates a self-fulfilling prophecy, which we'll consider and talk about down the road here. After reading an article about lottery winners, you start to overestimate your potential ability to win the lottery, and you start playing the lottery a lot more. And how about this one? It's a good one, bottom left corner down there, and in the middle, your mother, your next door neighbor, and your best friend all have been in car accidents in the last year. And according to the availability heuristic, you're going to feel that the chances of you being in a car accident are also pretty high. Now, maybe you have a friend who didn't know anybody who's had a car accident, and so they may consider the fact that, they're pretty safe behind the wheel. They don't have anything to worry about. So that's the availability heuristic. This is a good little video clip just about what's deadlier, sharks or horses, and it looks at the availability heuristic at work. So a good little video clip, and it's pretty short, just a couple minutes long. I would check that out if you're uncertain about availability heuristic at all. Let's look at representative heuristic. This is based on estimated probability of an event on how similar it is to the typical prototype of the event. So a good example here is of the pennies at the bottom. Which is more likely to occur when flipping a penny in the air 6 times? The top row, which is all tails, or the bottom row, which is heads, 2 tails, heads, tail, and heads. What's interesting, the answer is, and if you look at the availability heuristic there, or representative heuristic, sorry, it wouldn't be the top one, it would be the one that's highlighted there, because people generally believe that the bottom sequence is more likely. After all, coin tossing is a random affair, and the bottom sequence looks much more representative of a random process, but the representative heuristic leads people astray. And in this case, it's because the probability of the exact sequence is precisely the same, 1 in 64. So here's the thing. The top row is also 1 in 64, isn't it? You've got 2 things that could happen every time you flip the coin, and half the time you might get heads, half the time you might get tails. It's a little bit confusing. There's more, and I took that right from PSYCH-Trek. If you have some questions about that one, definitely check out PSYCH-Trek. But another example, and this is more clear, I think, is someone who loves math more likely to be a math professor or a high school student? Now remember, we're talking about representative heuristic here, so this will give you a good idea of what this means. The answer is, of course, high school student, high school math student. There are many more high school students who love math and raw numbers than there are college professors, period. So that gives you a little bit of a clue here as to what we're talking about. The representative heuristic means that it's more looking at the chances, the overall chances of something occurring or happening. So, Daniel Kahneman is who we'll look at here next. Daniel Kahneman is a person who's won the Nobel Prize, and many people consider him to be a psychologist. Yet there is not a Nobel Prize. There is not presently a psychology area in the Nobel Prize. But a number of people have done this, whether it be with biology. Eric Kandel for memory won, basically. He looked at memory that was in snails. But Daniel Kahneman, this Israeli-American psychologist, he won the 2002 Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Sciences. But these economic sciences are really about judgment, decision-making, and cognitive behavior. So currently, he's a professor at Princeton, and he's married to an award-winning cognitive psychologist, Ann Trustman, who studies attention and perception. But Tversky, who we mentioned earlier, and Kahneman began researching apparent anomalies and contradictions in human behavior. How do people risk or manage risk and uncertainty. Some of these are very interesting because they go counter to what we would expect. If your parents or your friends or someone has said to you about psychology, oh, it's common sense, that's an easy class, this is where I would point you to explain that it's not quite common sense. It's named after, their work is named after prospect theory, and they picked that for no reason other than it was a catchy name. But probably the prospects of you doing something, maybe. But they developed this over a 30-year period, and is highly important in economics, especially in financial economics. And this is similar to game theory, which we'll discuss later in the year. But in 2002, Kahneman shared the Nobel Prize, but unfortunately, Amos Tversky had died by that time and didn't get his share of the prize. I kind of compared Kahneman with Yoda in some ways because he's kind of similar. In the TED Talk that he is in the picture there with, and I think there's a link to it in here, he discusses a patient's undergoing colonoscopy, which is sort of the roto-rooter of human plumbing. That's about the best I can give you on that. And they would look at people who reported their pain every 60 seconds. How much did these patients think they suffered? And you look at the elapsed time. It's interesting, after 10 minutes or 20 minutes, you see a different kind of pain intensity. And it's part of what he's looking at here with things that we would be surprised at seeing. He also looked with Tversky at this thing, good night, buddy, at this thing called risky decision making. So when subjects were offered a choice formulated in a certain way, they might display risk aversion, which means they don't want to risk. But when offered essentially the same choice formulated in a little bit of a different way, they were risk seekers and willing to do that. So we've got some examples down there at the bottom for you. People may drive across town to save $5 on a $15 calculator, but they're not going to drive across town to save $5 on a $215 coat, or $125 coat, sorry. Isn't that interesting? It's still $5 any way you slice it. And a calculator doesn't weigh, or it doesn't weigh as much in terms of worth. Wouldn't you think that people would be much more willing to drive across town for the $125 coat? It's interesting, isn't it? Human behavior is a little bit strange. Which would you rather have? $1,000 right now, at this minute, I hand it to you, done story. We're finished. There's your $1,000 bill with Cleveland on it. Or a 50% chance of actually getting $2,500 or risking getting nothing. So with a flip of a coin, we can determine whether or not you're going to get $2,500, risk it all for $2,500, or stick and stay and get $1,000. What would most people do? Most people are going to choose sometimes to risk, and it depends on how it is presented to someone exactly. But attitudes towards risks concerning gains may be quite different from attitudes towards risking concerning losses. So it depends on how it's placed and given to you. Would you rather have $1,000 right now, or 50% chance of having $250 or $2,500? Sorry. That you may well choose the certain $1,000 in preference to the uncertain chance of getting $2,500, even though the mathematical expectation of uncertain option is $1,250. So it all depends on sort of how it's asked. Our attitude concerning gains are sometimes very difficult concerning losses. It's perfectly reasonable attitude described in this thing called risk aversion. But Kahneman and Tversky found that the same people do often choose the risky alternative. And this is called risk-seeking behavior, and it's not necessarily irrational, but it is important for analysts to recognize the asymmetry of human choices. And so what they did was they really studied these human choices scientifically to see what people would be more willing to do. In the book Thinking Fast and Slow by Kahneman, He wrote about these findings and these kinds of studies they did in this broad area of the human mind in general. That humans evolved decision-making shortcuts to aid in survival. Avoiding losses is one example of this. It's sort of an evolutionary process. Often we mediate these gut reactions with logical reasoning. But even so, our brain will frequently run up against its limits, leading to flaws in our thinking. The little example there on the side, it's kind of hard to see, so I'll pop it up full screen here for you. It says, in the book, Thinking Fast and Slow, author Daniel Kahneman shared proof that frowning aided in suppressing intuitive thinking. I told you it was a little small to read. But frowning aided in suppressing intuitive thinking and allowed analytical thoughts to develop. So, interesting. Frowning would make you feel more critical about certain things. See, but smiling, you're probably going to be maybe more happy-go-lucky. Interesting. This is the link to the TED Talk from Kahneman. Also, be a decent thing to do for extra credit. I would allow it, but and you get one of those per 9-week period. But Kahneman talking about our experiencing selves, and he uses examples from vacations and colonoscopies. The Nobel laureate and founder of behavioral economics, and he's really one of the founding persons who came up with this idea of what behavioral economics even really is. He reveals that our experiencing selves and our remembering selves perceive happiness really very differently. I believe, if I'm remembering this correctly, he says the ultimate vacation is 3 days in length. It's 3 or 4, I can't remember, but it's pretty short in what you would think. Most people think, give me a week, give me 2 weeks at the beach, it'd be wonderful. What he has found through his studies is that people will be just as pleased with their 3-day vacation as they are with 2 weeks. And if you think about it, if you push it 2 weeks and you're leaving on the first day of vacation, you're coming back on the last day, you go to work exhausted, you may be even less excited about your holiday. Those 2 weeks sort of seem like, 3 days just on a repeat anyway. So I guess it depends on how you look at things, but I would probably take 2 weeks just at first glance at this point anyway. So that's our look today at cognition and thought process and action. And I want to challenge you to really consider. There are some things from these notes that are important. I think the decision making, the 4 types of decision making are pretty important. Availability heuristic and representative heuristic. Those are important to wrap your mind around. But some of the other things are just general knowledge situations to help you understand how cognition works. So if anything, focus in on the 2 that we've mentioned here. Until next time, don't forget to be awesome.